Well, hello there, and welcome back to Watches Live, episode 26. We've got a little bit of everything tonight, so I had to come up with a catch-all title, Silver and Gold. So quite literally, every silvery metal plus gold. On the table tonight, I have to say there's a preponderance of high horology and a distinct preponderance of chronographs. That said, we've got some vintage, contemporary, sports, and dress styles. And we have all three of the Holy Trinity plus Lange represented, Switzerland and Germany alike. Tuning in, I see Edward Ledden of Sweden first in there, and speaking of Germany, Don Gizel 615, noted scorpion collector and breeder, Simon Holt, Eddie Landsberg, True Lie, and Mozart Reveal. Welcome, guys. Okay, tonight let's start with a watch that has an incredible story behind it. This watch showed up on my desk, and I quite literally lost it. This is about as good as it gets in the world of vintage, and it's one of the few vintage watches that has a historic tribute watch dedicated to it in a current model line at a big three manufacturer. This, let me see how close I can get, guys. This is a Turler retailed vintage Vacheron Constantin reference 6099. Now, when this came out in 1955, it was the bicentennial watch for Vacheron, literally the 200th anniversary watch for Vacheron. When it debuted at 5.3 millimeters thick, it was the world's thinnest wristwatch. Now, in 1953, Jaeger LeCoultre combined with Vacheron and Audemars Piguet to develop the 803 Abauche into a high horology ultra-thin movement, 1.64 millimeters thick. Now, AP launched its version in 1953, but Vacheron wanted 2 more years of refining the movement before it launched for the 200th anniversary of the brand in 1955. Now, this is important because it shows you just how old Vacheron really is. Vacheron was older in 1955 than Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet are now. The watch has the spectacular Maltese cross-style lug motif that inspired the later reference 6073. You know it as the inspiration for this year's 56 collection. Now, if you look in the collection right now, you'll notice Vacheron Constantin's Extra Plot Ultra Thin 1955 in the Historique collection is a tribute to this watch using the same 1003 ultra thin base movement, and we know that this one was made between 1955 and 1957 because it has a personalized inscription on the back. It also has an extraordinary Milanese style mesh bracelet with a 3-position adjustment. This is as good as it gets in the vintage realm. Plus, you'll note not just a vintage plexi, that was common back then, and not just the Vacheron et Constantin signature with the ampersand, that went away in the early 70s. It's co-signed by Turler, an old family jeweler out of Zurich that I believe went out of business in the fall of 2017. So there quite literally will not be any more along these lines. A spectacular historic piece, 32 millimeters in diameter, but I've got a story about that. First of all, don't judge a book by its size, not necessarily its cover. Second, back in 2012, I was involved in planning for the 70th anniversary ceremonies for the Battle of Midway commemoration at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. We brought in some of the guys who were veterans. These were guys all in their 90s who'd flown off the USS Enterprise. And yeah, they were about 100 pounds, tiny little guys. They came in their wheelchair, but you know what? In a room full of military professionals, those guys were the biggest badasses by far because they flew tinfoil planes at a carrier air group in a war the U.S. could actually lose with no hope of rescue if they went down, which is to say, judge people and things by the standards of their time and by the frames of reference of their time. In 1955, this watch was the epitome of refinement, style, and masculinity, just as those old aviators were hardcore badasses in their day. Judge it by the standards of the 50s, and this was as good as it got. 32 millimeters, big deal. That watch has gravitas. Okay. Now here's the deal. I've got Vacheron, I've got AP, I've got Patek Philippe. Boy, have I got Patek Philippe. I have 1, 2, 3 Nautilus references on the table tonight, all steel, but none of them can compare to the hero watch from tonight's thumbnail. If you were clicking the thumbnail and entering the video, you probably saw this monster, and it was worth the wait. In 2004, Lange one-upped its own datograph, quite literally, by adding a split-minute capability. In a 43mm case, the result was the Double Split Flyback. Platinum, this is the reference 404035, a discontinued double split. The watch allows you to time 2 events up to 30 minutes, and as you can see on the minute register, you can split the minutes as well as the seconds. So let's say you have one event that ends at 10 minutes and another that ends at 20 minutes and 37 seconds. You can record both using the double split, because unlike a conventional split-second chronograph, which can only split seconds, it can split minutes up to 30. Now, the watch is surprisingly wearable, and I'm going to throw this one on the wrist. But first, keep in mind, it is a flyback, which means not only is it a split second, but it is a flyback, so you can actually reset it on the fly without having to stop it first. Turn it over, it gets better. Caliber L001.1, 40 jewels, 465 parts, and you'll note 2 column wheels. Let me get as close as we can, guys. Really zoom in on that and focus it in. You'll note this is an incredible movement that starts with the dados L95 and then goes completely off the rails, Aussie style. Note the structure just under my finger. That is the instantaneous minute jumper for both of the minute registers. Yes, it's also an instantaneous jumping minute. You look at the depth of this movement. You can look into this movement from the top, yes, but unlike most calibers, you can look into it diagonally and sideways. It's worth buying this watch simply for the case back, and you'll note all the standards, German silver bridges and plates, beautifully polished, black polished screw heads used for adjustments, blued screws used for physical assembly, lateral clutch, column wheel, both of them, as well as the hand-engraved balance cock, which you could almost miss, but rest assured, this watch is finished beautifully even in the places where you can't entirely see it. That is the Lange Sohne Double Split, a watch that revolutionized the industry in 2004, still going strong today, but you won't be able to buy this one new because it is a discontinued platinum black dial reference. And you can hear outside Philadelphia's finest. We are in an old city center, and we love it. But I have a watch that might just outpunch the sirens on that police car, and not just that cop car. The double split. That's right, the double split is not the most impressive chronograph on the table tonight. It's not even close. Guys, I don't know if you've seen one of these, but I've sung its praises sight unseen in the past on my feature shows. This is the mighty 2000 Glashutte Original Pano Retrograph. What does it do? Well, watch that chronograph register because things are about to get crazy. The chronograph, you'll note, is running backwards. Not only is the chronograph running backwards, I programmed it. How'd I do that? Well, there is a scrolling tri-level concentric circular scale, or I should say semicircular scale, and you'll note that it's just 1 minute short of 0. Why is that important? Because it's a programmable countdown timer in addition to being a conventional flyback chronograph. And what happens at the end of a 30-minute countdown? Well, you're about to find out, because this watch features circular gongs and strikers exactly like a minute repeater. Caliber 6001, by the way. And when the watch reaches the end of its programmed countdown, and you can program it to any time from 1 minute up to 30, this happens. How cool was that? And in case you missed it, I'm going to fire it up again. Okay. So the first thing you do is you pull the crown out to its intermediate position. And now you set that scale. That's 10 minutes, 20 minutes. There we go. Push the crown back. And now what happens, if you start it up, and then you go into flyback mode, listen carefully. How slick is that? Okay, so let's take a closer look at this watch and what it's all about. The first thing you're going to note is that 39.5 millimeters in platinum, this 50-piece limited edition from 2000 is an absolute sensation. You can wear this on your wrist with none of the pomp and circumstance of the 43 millimeter, 16 millimeter thick double split. Now turn it over, it gets better. Glashutte Original manufacture caliber 6001 is as good as it gets in Saxony. And yes, that includes the likes of Lange and even the likes of Maurice Grossman. Beautifully executed manual winding. You can see not just engraved, but featuring the same gongs as a minute repeater and the striker to create the same quality of tone and sustain. 42-hour power reserve, yes, limited series of 50. They only made 50 in platinum, 150 in white gold. Rose gold was not limited production, but rest assured very few were made. Still a conventional flyback chronograph, albeit one with an inverted flyback system. It also features the now signature Glashutte Original Panorama Datum, or outsized date. Okay, absolutely sensational. If I have to pick between the double split and that, guys, I love Lange, but that thing is insane. All right, now, chronographs, options, new and vintage. Let's talk about a watch from the Vallee de Joux that combines some of the mechanical fascination and certainly the innovation of both the double split and the Panerai retrograph. Let's talk about the Jaeger LeCoultre Duometre Chronograph. Now this watch came out in 2007 and it was a sensation because you have the time of day, you have a chronograph register, and you have a mono pusher. And when you start the mono pusher chronograph, hours and minutes on one scale with a digital window for single-digit minutes. You also get a flying second. You'll also note 1, 2 power reserves, both of 50 hours. Can we get a little closer to this dial, guys? Now, the Platinum watch was exceptionally expensive and exceptionally rare. With a gorgeous granular dial, there's nothing else quite like it. Now, when you turn it over, I believe it gets even better. Now you're looking at a movement that is quite literally built like a Lange. Broad, open, deep, and made of German silver. You can see that gorgeous golden tone across the bridges. Now, in the French-speaking watchmaking world, it's not known as German silver, it's Mosso, but it's the same nickel, copper, zinc material. You'll note the Côte de Soleil sunburst that emanates out from the balance across the bridges. You'll see the mono pusher with its levers and horns interacting, and you'll note nothing is hidden in a conventional manual wind chronograph. You can even see the recentering hammers at center. You'll also note that because it has 2 power reserves, both operating a separate drivetrain, you'll note that 2 separate drivetrains meet at a single balance. So it's effectively 2 movements with 2 power sources and a single escapement to alternate the power flow between the two. Impressive? You better believe it. Perhaps even more impressive is the fact that the watch lives up to JLC's boast. They said that the watch would be as accurate as a chronometer while operating 2 separate complications. The reason is that with 2 power reserves, there is no loss of amplitude on the balance when you start the chronograph. Double the power drain, double the power applied, with no loss of amplitude and no loss of time. Now, when you stop the chronograph, you can see down to 1/6 of a second, thanks to the Foudroyant hand, what the time was. Also note, unconventionally for chronographs, it has a center seconds hand for the time of day, constant center seconds, plus the chronograph seconds hand. And you'll note when you reset, the Foudroyant first recenters itself, and then the rest springs back to attention. And you can start the chronograph and leave it running to create spectacular vistas like this. I love the diagonally opposed. One giant double-sided hand across the dial. Now, I own the white gold version with the black dial, so I put my money where my mouth is. I own this watch. One other cool feature before we go. Because it has twin mainspring barrels and only 1 crown, the 1 crown winds both barrels, and you'll note the ratchet system at the top. 1 ratchets while the other winds in the opposite direction. And in a system every manual wind watch should copy, you can't accidentally overwind it. It decouples the mainspring and prevents overwinding. Please, everyone who's doing a manual wind watch in the 21st century, implement this system. Now I see a comment from Andrew. ST12, I prefer the moon phase one. Now the moon phase features a date, a moon phase, and a focus on chronometry. It also allows you to zero reset both the seconds hand and the foudroyant to set the watch precisely to not the second, but the sixth of a second. And there's a gorgeous enamel dial 40.5 millimeter case version. This one's 42, but there's a gorgeous 200-piece white gold enamel Grand Faux version of that exact watch that I will own someday. So you have excellent taste, Andrew. Okay, so Eddie Landsberg asking, when and where will the winner of the Crystal Skull giveaway be announced? Next week. This is the last week of our Bird Vallee horological sculpture giveaway. You can see luscious lucite, handmade, autoclaved and stabilized, reclaimed watch and clock parts, individually cleaned ultrasonically and detailed, set in lucite, baked for 8 hours to stabilize. It comes with a huge accessory set, including a leather tote bag like you see here, a polishing cloth, certificate of origin, and a gorgeous handmade wooden box that is part of the display set. You'll also note the sterling silver engraved plaque on the back of each one. And since the Audemars Piguet Stade Classic perfectly matches the color scheme of that tote bag, I may as well segue from one to the other. Bonus points, guys, if you can tell me in the chat box which movie included a reference to luxury watches and Stade in the same scene, because this is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Stade Classic Chronograph from 2009, a limited edition of 50 pieces, as you can see from the case back, dedicated to the Stade Classic Road Rally in Switzerland. It is an annual road rally for antique cars that features about 100 participants every year. And for many years, Audemars Piguet and its executives were both sponsors and participants of the Stade Classic. And this was one of the watches released in conjunction with the event in 2009. Now, 50 pieces, what sets this one apart is not just the color scheme, but the fact that it is a completely media-blasted titanium case with the rubber-clad bezel. So you have the colors of the Stade Classic logo with the red, the gray, the white, and the black. Then you have the rubber-clad bezel, then you have the media-blasted 42mm titanium case, and a custom double-stitched contrasting strap. Note that it's not the hornback alligator. Attention to detail is rich with this one, as even the folding clasp is a media-blasted matte titanium. 50 pieces, and you don't have to be into vintage cars, but I will say that this is one of the best Royal Oak Offshore limited editions because it's just handsome. And if you've ever wondered about scratching and scuffing a Royal Oak bezel, as beautifully finished as they are, it is difficult to put that first nick in. This is a rubber-clad bezel, so scratches and scuffs tend to disappear. As you can see, this one's pre-owned. It's got a few of them, but they don't stand out like they do on polished and satin-finished metal. This is the more durable, everyday wearable offshore. And discontinued. They don't make the rubber-clad anymore in any form. All right. So, a question from AC4 about Langes during the 1930s in Germany. That's a worthwhile question. Lange during the 1930s was the company that we call Glashutte Original today. That's right. Lange, the current company, did not exist in the 40s, 30s, 20s, going back to F.A. Lange in 1845, because the original Lange und Sohne became the communist GUB, the Glashutte Uhrengetriebe, basically the Glashutte watch factory. And if you note, a lot of current Glashutte Original movements are still stamped GUB. This one is. It's the GUB 60. But Lange und Sohne today is a company that was reestablished by Walter Lange in 1990 after the fall of the wall. He was actually based out of West Germany during the Cold War. And along with Lothar Schmidt and Gunter Blumlein, he helped to reestablish Lange. Also, Hartmut Notte helped, and it was a modern company. It has no real heritage prior to 1990 other than Walter, but in the modern era, you could argue that no German watch brand has been more innovative or influential or accomplished. What's been achieved in just over 2 decades is stunning stuff. So that's the lineage of the 2 major modern German watch brands. Okay, and it was by special dispensation, it was by permission of Glashutte Original that Lange reestablished his brand. Okay, so let's talk about the last of the super chronos on the table tonight. This is one that came completely out of the blue, and I have to say, this is immediately my favorite Patek Philippe 3970. This is a watch that represents the very last of the line, probably a 2003 or 2004. This reference, the 3970, brought Patek Perpetual Calendar chronographs into the modern era. It was made from 1986 to about 2004 when the 5970 took over with the same movement, but this one has a far more traditionally sized case without a tachymeter scale. Let me see if I can take a little bit more of the fingerprint off the crystal, because this one deserves a good solid look. 36.5 millimeters. These came in about 3.5 series. The original was built in maybe 100 pieces. The second series was the first to feature a snapback case, but generally it was not a display case back. The third series did away with the older style leaf hands and indices and went, can we, yeah, there we go. And the third series, the most numerous, used these dart-style indices and baton-style hands. What changed with the series sometimes known as the fourth series is that the serial numbering changed and the pin buckle was replaced with a full deployant. And when it's a platinum deployant, that's a big upgrade. It adds considerable heft and opulence to the watch. This particular 3970p has a stunning black dial to match the white metal case. And what I always tell people with 3970s is look at the lugs. On the very earlier version, on the earliest versions, generation 1 and 2, look at the hallmarks in the side of the case. They don't do them in the side of the case anymore in the third and the fourth series. Here I say look at the fluting of the lugs. Is it intact? It should be completely defined. There should be no beveled transition from the top of the lug to the flank. The hood of the lug should transition to the flank exclusively in a fluted line that is continuous from the root where it joins the case to the terminus of the lug. And when you can see that fully defined, unrounded, undiminished fluting, you know that you're looking at a case in top condition. Now, stay focused, stay close, get close again. There we go. The dial on this one has a gorgeous gloss black. It features white gold indices, and you can see in beautiful reflective relief the details of the dial here. And then you turn it over, and you have the Lemania-based Patek Philippe caliber CH2770/155, adjusted in 8 positions. Yes, 8 positions, 6 standard positions, plus to hot and to cold for isochronism, 24 jewels, hand wound. You can almost see the Breguet over coil because the balance and the hairspring are so huge on this old style 18,000 vibration per hour movement. Now I'm going to show you why you want a lateral clutch chronograph, not a vertical clutch, when you have a display case back. It's because you can see everything. Now you're going to watch as I start the chronograph. You can see the lateral clutch moving in and out. This is the clutch right here. It moves into contact and drives the chronograph. It moves out. You can also see the column wheel interacting with its levers. Now you can see the recentering hammers acting on the heart cams at center. That's why you want a manual wind movement and a lateral clutch when you have a chronograph with a display case back. Why? Because it is beautiful. And yes, old school Poinçon de Genève. You can see that this, every single 3970 was made before the 2009 switch over to the Patek Philippe seal. That is the 3970 I would own, because I like black dials and white metal cases. I don't necessarily style with the silver and the colored golds, but I might make an exception for the next watch on the table. Bum, 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 bum. We have a comment from JBO Surf. Hope there is a Journe Sontograph on the table. I do have a Journe. Less common than the Sontograph by far. You'd have to find a Sontograph F with the Ferrari red dial to rival the rarity of the FP Journe I have on the table tonight. But as I said, here's a colored gold watch along with my vintage Vacheron that I would wear because I happen to adore this Rolex Daytona's combination of a full Arabic numeral dial in blue, matte blue, with a yellow gold case. Now this is a early V series with the old style clasp. This was roughly 2009, early 2009. This is a dial that you rarely ever see on a strap. You rarely see it on a bracelet, but when you do, it's generally on the bracelet. To see it on a strap is extraordinary and means this watch wears true to its 47.6mm lug-to-lug span because there are no solid end links about the bracelet to extend it. Now, the dial is fully loomed. All of the numerals, the indices at 3, 9, and 6, as well as the hands at center. It is spectacular in the dark. It is spectacular with all of its flourishes of contrasting color by day. And at 40mm, this is a gold watch I would wear. I love the look of this watch. 20mm lug spacing, and because the watch comes on a strap, you can, in good conscience, throw this one on a NATO, throw it on a Rubber B, throw it on an Everest. You'd have to have a watchmaker put it on a Rolex bracelet, however. This is a Rolex designed to be worn on a strap, and it looks absolutely sensational with that burgundy brown strap, blue dial, gold accents, red hands, and yellow gold case. This is a sensational Daytona. If you want a Rolex, but you don't want to be a lemming, you don't want to follow the herd, you don't want to be a carbon copy of anyone else, this is the Rolex to wear when you never want to see your own watch on another wrist. I love that piece. Okay, not high horology, but luxury horology. And I often define the difference as a watch that's principally machine-built and finished versus a watch that's principally hand-finished and hand-built. This is a watch that still does involve a good deal of handcraft, but because it features a Richard Habring-designed Rattrapante module on a 7750, I consider this IWC Portuguese Chronograph Rattrapante to be more luxury horology than true high horology. And I should clarify, it's not a Rattrapante module added to a 7750. In fact, it is a 7750 that has been completely eviscerated, taken apart, internally rebuilt to incorporate the IWC split-second mechanism, and then reassembled. So this is not a modular Rattrapante in any way, shape, or form. This is actually a movement that's more IWC than it is Vallee de Joux at this point. So dramatic were the Richard Habring modifications to the 7750. Now, what's different about this versus almost every Portuguese chronograph ever made is that this is the 3712, not the 3714. The 3714, made from 1998 to this year, is the most numerous Portuguese ever made. Go ahead and try to find another rose gold, black-dialed Portuguese Rattrapante. This is a truly spectacular watch. It has the look of the Portuguese. It has the style of the Portuguese. It has real IWC original watchmaking inside. I consider this, because of the modifications, to be a manufacturer movement. That's how much it's changed. And you get a very cool complication built on top of a bulletproof automatic caliber. And if you think the Portuguese is just a little bit too big for you, the Portuguese chronograph automatic is just over 41mm as I measure it with my caliber. Not a 42.34 plus, just over 41mm. That's a gorgeous watch. That's a great way to get into IWC, by the way. If you're going to go with an IWC and you're only going to own one, get yourself a Portuguese or get yourself a Pilot. I love the Portofino. It's my personal favorite IWC model line. And obviously, Aquatimers have their place if you want to get really wet and crazy. The Ingenieur has been in the catalog for decades. But IWC, if you want to own the iconic IWC, you get yourself a Pilot's chronograph, a big Pilot, or a Portuguese. Also, purists, take one last look at that gorgeous black dial. You know what you don't see on this dial? You don't see a date. That's going to be manna from heaven for the anti-date movement. Now, let's say you want to own an impressive and accomplished complication from a high horology house, but you're not into chronographs. That's okay. I find chronographs are among the least used complications, even if they're among the most purchased. So I have a very tidy example of a Patek Philippe Nautilus 5726 annual calendar, but you notice anything different about this one? I've often mentioned in my videos that you can get the Nautilus on a strap on a Patek Philippe factory rubber strap, but I rarely show you what I'm talking about. I rarely have one to show you. This is a steel Nautilus annual calendar with its spectacular gradient dial on a Patek Philippe factory rubber strap. So the watch is 120 meters water resistant with a screw-down crown, and that despite its display case back over its caliber 324 QA. But water resistance is of no avail if you can't get your strap wet. This is the rubber strap, and notice how closely it parallels the leather strap in appearance. It features a monotone stitch. It's similar in thickness. It even has a contrasting underside to match the calfskin underlay of the factory leather strap. It does a good job of imitating the leather, meaning this watch has the same elegance and grace of the leather-clad variant, only it has the versatility to actually get wet. And with an annual calendar, we've finally got a complication that I can endorse. I'll use that every day to date memos, correspondences, and emails. This is a wonderful combination of a balanced display. Notice everything on a vertical axis with a rugged 40.5 millimeter steel case that you can actually get wet. It's the best of both worlds. It's an office watch and it's a beach watch. So a question from Ryan, Tim, 15202, so a Royal Oak Jumbo, the ultra thin, the classic, the JLC powered Royal Oak Jumbo, I think you know where I'm going with this, or a 5711. Okay, given that choice, I'm going to go with the Jumbo. I'll admit two things. First, the Nautilus features a far higher water resistance rating, while a 15400 Royal Oak, which is the mainstream 41mm automatic, does have a screw-down crown and is rated at 50 meters. The Jumbo really should not get wet. Though rated at 50 meters, it's a push-down crown, which means immediately it forces you to buy another Audemars Piguet to get wet. So the Nautilus has it all over the Jumbo for versatility. 120 meters and a screw-down does not mess around. That said, the Royal Oak has history. It has its original JLC movement behind it. Remember, the Nautilus 3700 of 1976 and the Royal Oak of 1972, the 5402, were both powered by the same JLC 920, finished in-house by the two manufacturers to their standards. So if we're going to roll back the clock and give me a time machine to go back to 72 and 76, I'd probably wind up getting the 3700. Because then I've got the same ultra-slim profile, the JLC movement, significantly the original Gerald Genta monoblock case. You lose that with the 5711. That went away in 2006. For me, the Nautilus I want is the one with the monoblock case. The fact that it's got a JLC-based movement, that's just the cherry on the cake. Or I should say the icing on the cake, the cherry on the sundae. I was good at analogies back when I was in high school. I still am. Okay. Questions. Bretton Bowman joining us. What's up, Tim? Indeed, what's up? And I see our latest commenter waiting on the Journe. You got it, my man. This is a throwback to the day, 2003 to 2004, when FP Journe was still making brass movements. And this is an extraordinary example of the first generation brass caliber calendrier. FP Journe's annual calendar, this model was made from 2003 to 2004 with the brass movement and then discontinued. I'm going to open up the clasp and the bracelet, and in the process of doing so, draw attention to the fact that this is not just a brass movement, as you can see the rhodium-plated brass caliber. This is a brass movement 2-year model on a full bracelet. And not just a full bracelet, but the end links for this bracelet, if you could look close, let's see how close we can get to the movement, guys. Yep, there we go. The end links on this bracelet were made in France by FP Journe's old case maker, Eleanor of Paris. It was actually located just outside of Paris, but he later bought Eleanor and moved it into Geneva as Boîtier de Genève, his case factory. This is a double hallmarked case. Made in France, it has the French hallmarks and the Swiss hallmarks. It is a double hallmarked bracelet. Most of these watches came on straps. This has the full platinum bracelet with the French and the Swiss hallmarks on the end links that are platinum. Platinum case, platinum bracelet, rhodium-plated movement. This is a watch that was made for just a few months because on top of everything else toward the end of the run of this series, the cases stopped being stamped with their year of manufacture. And that was right at the end, the last of the brass movements, the last of the 2004 cases. And this one, on top of all those exclusivity factors, has a full bracelet and the rarely seen varnished yellow gold dial. It's an annual calendar. All of the adjustments are executed using the crown. A handsome and spectacular 5-day power reserve automatic winder. This is quintessential Journe style. You see this watch from across the room and you know that dial is FP Journe. What only you and other connoisseurs will know is just how rare this full bracelet, French hallmarked, brass movement calendrier truly is. JBO Surf chiming in. Bracelet FP Journe are awesome. They are. What you can't see is just how heavy this watch is. It's incredible. It feels like a Rolex Daytona 2 on a full platinum bracelet or a full gold Royal Oak Offshore with bracelet. It's that impressive. And I have to say, the most undersold feature of FP Journe watches is the comfort of their bracelets. We never talk about it because we hardly ever see them. Okay, but we're not done. I can see Jonathan Syriac of Ann Arbor, is it Jonathan, or you of Ann Arbor, Michigan? I think you've been in our wrist shots before, saying that watch needs a black dial and it would be a killer. Yes, a black label version of that would be a killer. You're absolutely right. That said, I can show you a spectacular black dial watch from another independent, also founded by a French watchmaker, a compatriot of FP Journe, a little bit older, but during the 1990s, Daniel Roth was one of the original stars of independent horology, and his signature Ellipso Curvex case, which you can see here in the Daniel Roth Master Chronograph, was one of those instantly identifiable designs, like the sympathy case of Roger Dubuis from the same period, or FP Journe's quirky dials. You see this case design and you just know it's Daniel Roth. And he chose from amongst the best movements available for his mainstream models, this one featuring a Zenith caliber 400, doing business as the Daniel Roth 500. Yes, a Zenith El Primero in a white gold Daniel Roth Ellipso Curvex case. 47 millimeters lug to lug, 11 millimeters thick, and 40 millimeters wide. This is a timeless watch that will be respected more as time goes by. I'm going to give the last word to a brand that I love dearly and collect exclusively, and that's Jaeger LeCoultre, because we talked about chronographs, we talked about our silver and gold theme, but here's a watch that brings it all together, and I actually own a watch from this family. It's the 2007 stainless steel Aston Martin Amvox 2 DBS chronograph. Aston Martin themed. The difference between this and the Amvox 2 that I own is that mine's titanium. This was the only steel Amvox 2 model. They made 499 of them. You can see the Aston Martin winged logo on the case back right there. And you can also see it on the constant seconds indicator at 6 o'clock. That's another difference between the Amvox 2 and the DBS. You'll note that this has both an open center dial, so you can see the full chronograph minutes and hour registers as well as the base plate, but you can also see the constant seconds indicator. The Amvox 2 did not have constant seconds. As ever, you have the same ingenious pivoting case that is a chronograph without pushers. You start it, you stop it, and you reset it by pressing the case. 44 millimeters in full polished stainless steel. This is a rare and spectacular landmark watch from Jaeger LeCoultre. Tag Heuer, you have the Aston franchise. Take note, go to town, study hall begins now. This is how you do it. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Remember, enter to win our Bird Valle horological sculpture. Link in the description below. I'm Tim. This is Watches Live. We're Watchbox Reviews and Watchbox Studios. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.